June 1st, 1940, 07:45 hours, 3,000 feet above the French coast. A British pilot lines up his shot on a German fighter. 400 rounds ready, 300 yards of clear sky. His first kill is seconds away. But here's what makes this moment impossible. 9 years earlier, this same pilot had both legs ripped off in a horrific crash. The military told him he'd never fly again. Medical boards rejected him. Regulations forbade it. Yet somehow, he's here, hunting enemy aircraft over Dunkirk. And what happens next doesn't just challenge everything we think we know about human limitations. It reveals a story so audacious, so defiant, that even his enemies couldn't help but respect him. Because when the Germans finally shot him down a year later, they did something unprecedented in warfare, something that would lead to one of the most brazen escape attempts ever recorded. This is the story of Douglas Bader, the ace who did his best for Britain during World War II. When war broke out in September 1939 and Germany invaded Poland, Bader had been out of the Royal Air Force for years. Medical boards and regulations had written him off. But as the crisis deepened, as the RAF scrambled to expand its fighter strength, he pushed back. He pestered every RAF contact he still had. Old squadron mates, former instructors, anyone who remembered him from Cranwell and from No. 23 Squadron. At first, the Air Ministry's answer was simple. No. Then it became maybe. Finally, they offered a test. November 1939, Central Flying School. Examiner officers expected a pitiful case. A man with 2 artificial legs who would struggle with basic maneuvers. Instead, they watched a pilot who seemed to have lost nothing in the years away from a cockpit. He flew loops, rolls, spins, and stall recoveries. He handled the aircraft cleanly on takeoff and landing. He demonstrated emergency procedures. The chief examiner marked his assessment with a single word: exceptional. The RAF had no rulebook line for fighter pilot with 2 artificial legs, so they wrote a new one. In February 1940, the medical board cleared him for flying duties. War had forced a decision that peacetime bureaucracy never would have allowed. His first wartime posting, No. 19 Squadron at Duxford, flying Spitfires. In May 1940, he flew his first combat patrols over Dunkirk, protecting the evacuation. On June 1st, at 3,000 feet over the beaches, he turned that patrol into his first victory. 2 weeks later, the RAF sent him where they needed hard men most. No. 242 Squadron. 242 was a Canadian unit, badly mauled in France. They'd lost friends, aircraft, and any remaining belief that the war was going well. They came back to Britain angry, under-equipped, and half convinced they were being thrown away. Bader turned up as acting squadron leader and did something most new commanders wouldn't dare. He refused to take his squadron into combat. Not because the pilots weren't ready. They were, because their aircraft weren't. They didn't have the tools, the spare parts, the basic equipment needed to stay in the fight. He sent a blunt signal up the chain. 242 Squadron operational as regards pilots, but non-operational, repeat, non-operational as regards equipment. He would not declare the squadron combat ready until someone in group headquarters fixed the problem. Within 48 hours, the parts and tools arrived. The message had been heard. By July 1940, 242 Squadron was ready, just in time. The Battle of Britain had begun. That summer, German bombers crossed the Channel almost every day. Junkers 88, Heinkels, Dorniers. Above them, the Messerschmitt Bf-109s flew escort, waiting to pounce on any RAF fighters that got too close. On July 11, 1940, Bader intercepted a Dornier 17 off the Norfolk coast. He closed in, fired 2 bursts, and watched the bomber disappear into the cloud-trailing smoke. one more entry in the growing list of combats that would define that summer. On August 30th, he led 12 Hurricanes from 242 Squadron into one of those lopsided fights that made headlines. About 100 German aircraft over Essex, bombers and fighters mixed. Bader took his squadron straight into them. When they landed, 242 claimed 12 enemy aircraft destroyed. They had lost nobody. His men followed him because he led from the front, but he also had an unexpected advantage. In high G turns, most pilots risked blacking out as blood drained from their heads into their legs. Bader's legs were aluminum and leather. They did not pull blood. He could hold harder turns a fraction longer, stay conscious a fraction longer. In close combat, fractions matter. By the end of 1940, he was one of Fighter Command's rising stars. By August 1941, he was Wing Commander Bader at RAF Tangmere, leading 3 squadrons of Spitfires on offensive sweeps over occupied France. 21 confirmed kills, the 5th highest score in Fighter Command. The Germans knew his name and his call sign. They studied his tactics, and on one clear August morning, they were ready for him. August 9th, 1941, 9 a.m., RAF Tangmere. Bader climbs into a Spitfire Mach-Va, serial number W3185, code letters DB. His ground crew has already done their checks. Fuel full, 8 Browning machine guns loaded, oxygen system working. He straps in, connects his mask, and brings the Merlin engine to life. 3 squadrons, 48 Spitfires in total, will accompany him on today's circus operation, a fighter sweep over northern France. The idea is simple. Cross the channel, climb to 30,000 feet, force the Luftwaffe to send up their fighters, kill as many as possible, and keep German units tied to the west instead of reinforcing the Eastern Front, where Hitler has just invaded Russia. Bader has flown this type of mission 63 times since March. The pattern rarely changes. British fighters appear over France. German radar picks them up. Bf-109s scramble. A short, violent fight. Victories claimed on both sides. An aircraft falling from the sky on both sides. At 10:15, the Tangmere wing crosses the French coast. Clear sky, no clouds, a dangerous kind of beauty. There is nowhere to hide if things go wrong. At 30,000 feet over northern France, Bader spots them. 12 Bf-109Fs climbing from below, 4,000 feet beneath his formation. He calls the sighting on the radio and pushes his Spitfire over into a diving attack. He has altitude, speed, and position. The German fighters are still climbing. They haven't seen him yet. He picks the lead 109, closes to 200 yards, and presses the firing button. 8 Brownings hammer out 400 rounds per second. The German's engine erupts in white coolant spray. The pilot rolls away, damaged at least, possibly destroyed. Bader pulls up, searching for another target. There, one turning left at 11 o'clock. He swings inside the German's turn, squeezes a 3-second burst. The 109's tail section shatters. The pilot bails out. His parachute opens high above the French countryside. 2 victories in about 90 seconds. Bader's total climbs to 23, but the remaining Bf-109s have now seen the Spitfires. The element of surprise is gone. They turn hard to engage. Bader's wingman calls a warning. 4 109s coming in from 7 o'clock high. Bader begins his brake turn, then something slams into his aircraft from behind. The impact is catastrophic. Metal tears, control cables snap. The Spitfire lurches violently to the right. Bader looks back and sees the problem. The tail is gone. The vertical stabilizer and part of the rear fuselage have been ripped away. The Spitfire snaps into an inverted spin, nose down. 30,000 feet of empty air between him and the ground. He yanks the canopy jettison handle. The canopy blows off. Wind at 300 miles per hour blasts into the cockpit. He releases his harness and tries to stand in the seat to bail out. His right leg doesn't move. The artificial limb is jammed between the seat and the control column. The forces of the spin have wedged it tight. 25,000 feet. The altimeter unwinds like a clock gone mad. He grabs his prosthetic with both hands and pulls. Nothing. The leg will not come free. 15,000 feet. Maybe 30 seconds of life left. Maybe less. The Spitfire is accelerating in its death spiral. Bader makes a decision that would become part of his legend. He unbuckles the upper leather strap that secures his right artificial leg to his thigh. The leg stays wedged in the cockpit. He pushes himself upward using his arms, dragging his body toward the open sky. The remaining strap still holds. For a moment he is half in, half out, torn between the cockpit and the slipstream. 10,000 feet. He pulls his parachute ripcord. The shock is violent. The sudden drag snaps the last leather strap. His right leg, still stuck in the Spitfire, wrenches free from his stump and disappears with the aircraft. Bader swings under the parachute, his left leg dangling, the right ending at the knee. 12 seconds later, Spitfire W3185 hits the ground 4 miles south of his descent point and explodes, sending a column of smoke 200 feet into the air. Bader watches his aircraft burn as he drifts down into occupied France. He has one artificial leg left. No escape kit, no weapon, and German soldiers are already running toward where he will land. He hits the ground at about 11:05. His head slams into the soil, and everything goes black. When he wakes, 2 German soldiers are standing over him. One is unbuckling his parachute. The other is staring at the stump of his right leg. They think he has just lost it in the crash. They don't yet know both legs are artificial. A Luftwaffe vehicle arrives and carries him north to Saint-Omer, to a hospital set up in a former French school. German medical staff treat wounded aircrew there. Bader becomes their only British patient. The examining doctor, a Luftwaffe Oberarzt, checks his injuries: minor concussion, bruised ribs, and abrasions. Then he notices the left leg is also artificial. He calls for an interpreter. Through halting translation, the story comes out. Both legs lost in a pre-war crash. Flying combat on prosthetics since early 1940. 23 confirmed victories. The doctor doesn't believe it until he sees the service record in Bader's uniform. Rank: Wing Commander. Decorations: Distinguished Service Order, Distinguished Flying Cross, and bars to both. Position: Commander of the Tangmere Wing. This is not just any prisoner. This is one of Britain's top aces. Word travels quickly up the Luftwaffe chain of command. Early that afternoon, the door opens and another visitor steps in. Oberst Adolf Galland, Gruppenkommandeur of Jagdgeschwader 26. 30 years old, 94 victories to his name. One of Germany's top aces. He has heard of Bader. German intelligence reports have mentioned the aggressive wing commander, leading large British fighter formations over France. What nobody in Germany knew until now is that the man flew with 2 artificial legs. Galland looks at the stump, at the single remaining prosthetic, and asks in English what happened. Bader explains: the jammed leg, the spin, the desperate choice, the parachute ripping it away. Galland nods, then asks a simple question: what do you need? Bader's answer is equally simple: a replacement leg. Galland says he will see what can be done. That night, he contacts Luftwaffe headquarters and requests permission to offer safe passage for a British aircraft to drop a prosthetic leg over Saint-Omer. The request goes from local HQ to higher command, up through ranks and titles, until it reaches Hermann Göring himself in Berlin. Göring, a First World War fighter ace, understands the unwritten code between airmen, even enemies. He approves the request. A message goes out through Red Cross channels to RAF Fighter Command. Wing Commander Bader is alive and in German custody. He requires a new artificial leg. The Luftwaffe will guarantee safe passage for one British aircraft to drop it by parachute over St. Omer within a specified time window. At RAF headquarters, the message lands on the desk of Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, commander of No. 11 Group, the same officer who had seen Bader fight in the Battle of Britain. The request is unprecedented, an enemy offering safe passage in the middle of a war. It is also an opportunity. The RAF is already planning a bombing raid on a power station near Bethune. St. Omer sits only about 20 miles away. The bombers will be in the general area anyway. The plan is drawn up. 6 Bristol Blenheim bombers will fly as part of the raid. One of them will carry Bader's new leg in a crate. Over St. Omer, it will drop the crate by parachute. Then the formation will proceed to attack the primary target. The Germans have guaranteed safe passage for the leg drop, not for anything after. August 19, 1941, RAF Wattisham. 6 Blenheims taxi out to the runway. One coded WVF carries not just bombs, but a wooden crate with a right artificial leg, straps, bandages, socks, tobacco, chocolate, and a note asking that it be delivered to Wing Commander Bader. Over France, German radar tracks the incoming raid. Galland has briefed his pilots. There will be no attack until after the crate is dropped. After that, normal combat rules apply. In St. Omer Hospital, Bader has been moved to a room with a window facing the airfield. The guards tell him to watch. The RAF is coming. He thinks it's a cruel joke. At 09:30, he hears the engines. He looks out and sees them. 6 Blenheims flying in formation, fighters circling above. One bomber passes over the airfield at 3,000 feet. A small shape tumbles from its belly. A parachute blossoms and drifts down onto the grass. The leg has arrived. German ground crew retrieves the crate. The bombers turn toward their primary target. The Luftwaffe fighters are finally released and launch to intercept. A short, bitter fight follows near the power station. Flak bursts in the sky. Bombs fall, mostly missing. Aircraft on both sides fall too. Back at St. Omer, German orderlies carry the crate into Bader's room and open it. Inside is a newer, better-made artificial leg from the same London company that built his originals. He straps it on, stands up, and walks the length of the room. That afternoon, he sends a short message through Red Cross channels. Leg thankfully received. But the story is not over, because Bader is not the kind of man who simply settles into captivity. From his window at St. Omer, he studies the hospital grounds and the guards' routines. 2 stories up, 20 feet above the ground, there is open farmland beyond the fence, and beyond that, roads leading toward the channel. There are also bed sheets. On the night of August 24th, he knots 4 sheets together, secures one end to the bed, and waits for the quietest moment of the night. Around 2 a.m., he opens the window, drops the improvised rope, and begins to climb down. He is halfway to the ground when a hospital worker spots the pale figure in the dark, shouts, running footsteps. Within 30 seconds, German guards are hauling him back into the building. 5 days after receiving his new leg, his first escape attempt failed. The Luftwaffe decides St. Omer is no longer secure enough for a prisoner like Bader. He will be sent to a proper camp, one designed specifically for captured airmen. Stalag Luft III. August 30th, 1941, east of Berlin, in occupied Poland, Stalag Luft III holds about 2,000 RAF prisoners, shot-down bomber crews, fighter pilots, navigators. Double barbed wire fences surround the compounds. Guard towers stand at the corners. Searchlights sweep the grounds through the night. The camp commandant, Colonel Friedrich Wilhelm von Lindiner, runs the place according to the Geneva Convention. Food is basic, but acceptable. Red Cross parcels come through. Prisoners are allowed letters and some limited activities. They are also allowed to try to escape. at their own risk. When Bader arrives, the senior British officer, Group Captain Harry Day, recognizes him immediately. They had flown together back in the early 1930s. Day briefs him on the situation. The camp is already tunneling. 3 tunnels, code-named Tom, Dick, and Harry, are in progress. Prisoners forge documents, make compasses, and sew civilian clothing out of dyed uniforms. Bader announces his intention immediately. He will escape. The Germans, having read his file, expected nothing else. One new security measure is put in place just for him. Every night at 10 p.m., guards enter his barracks, remove his artificial legs, and lock them away until 6 a.m. Without them, he cannot move far in the dark, cannot crawl to a tunnel, or sprint for the wire. He adapts. He cannot dig. Crawling through a cramped tunnel with prosthetic limbs would be all but impossible. But he can help in other ways. He watches guard patterns, notes roll call routines, and shares what he knows about German procedures from his time in St. Omer. He helps the forgery operation by providing details, talking to new arrivals, and gathering information. Then comes one of the boldest ideas of all: steal a German aircraft. A fellow prisoner, Bill Ash, obtains a cockpit diagram and operating instructions for a Messerschmitt 110 and learns there is a training airfield near Gliwice, about 150 miles away. If they can get on a work detail outside the camp, slip away, reach the airfield, and start an aircraft, they might fly to neutral territory. The plan requires forged passes, German uniforms quietly assembled from stolen bits of clothing and equipment, and a calculated gamble on fuel range and air defenses. In November 1941, Bader and Ash switch identities, with 2 real prisoners assigned to a road construction work party. At the gate, German guards check their papers and wave them through. They board a truck and leave Stalag Luft through behind. At the worksite near Gliwice, they can see aircraft in the distance. But when they finally get closer, they discover a grim problem. The aircraft available are short-range types. From this deep inside German-controlled territory, there is no neutral destination within safe reach, not without crossing thick layers of radar, flak, and fighter patrols. The risk is too high. They abort the attempt. Back at Stalag Luft III, a routine inspection uncovers that 2 men are missing from Bader's hut, and the identity switch is exposed. German military police go to the worksite. Bader and Ash are identified and brought back in handcuffs. Standard punishment follows: 10 days in solitary confinement, in an 8x6 cell with a bed, a bucket, and not much else. When he emerges, von Lindiner adds new restrictions: increased surveillance, more searches, more attention from the guards. For a few days, Bader is shadowed on every trip to the mess hall. But in a camp of 2,000 prisoners, procedures always slip. Within a week, life returns to a familiar pattern. Roll calls, parcels, quiet conspiracies, work on Tom, Dick, and Harry continues. Bader, limited by his legs, stays above ground, watching, warning, helping the complex machine of escape planning grind on. Winter hits. The ground freezes. The pace of tunneling slows. The camp waits for spring. In March 1942, the German High Command decides that some prisoners are simply too troublesome for a regular camp. Persistent escapers, the bad boys of the POW system, are to be concentrated in a special fortress prison. One of those men is Wing Commander Douglas Bader. He is put on a train bound for Saxony, Oflag 4C, better known to the prisoners as Colditz Castle. Colditz sits on a cliff above the River Mulde, a medieval fortress turned maximum security camp. Its walls are meters thick. Bars cover the windows. The guard-to-prisoner ratio is the highest in Germany. Inside is a collection of some of the most determined escape artists in Europe: British, French, Polish, Dutch, and Belgian officers who have already escaped from other camps, already tunneled, disguised, and run. Bader fits right in. He learns about one of the most ambitious projects in the castle, a glider, secretly being built in the attic. Prisoner engineers have calculated lift and glide ratios, designed a launching trolley that will roll down the sloping roof and hurl the glider into space. If it works, 2 men might ride it across the river and beyond the guards' reach. Bader, who had flown gliders in his training days, offers advice. But the project will take months and the war is moving fast. In the meantime, there are more immediate attempts. A tunnel from the chapel basement, disguises and feigned illnesses, fake paperwork. In June 1942, the chapel tunnel reaches 40 feet toward the outer wall before guards discover it and shut down the project. For punishment, rations are cut. Access to certain parts of the castle is restricted. Bader escapes direct blame that time. He had been helping on the surface, but he is placed under more scrutiny again. The years pass like this: plan, attempt, failure, plan, attempt, failure. 4 more times at Colditz, Bader gets involved in escape schemes that come to nothing, blocked by bad luck or tightened security. Each failure reinforces his reputation in German reports as uncooperative and incorrigible. He will not simply sit out the war quietly. By early 1945, the end of the war was visible from every window. From the east, Soviet artillery rumbles closer across Poland and Germany. From the west, American and British forces push through the Ruhr and beyond. At night, prisoners at Colditz can see distant flashes on the horizon. On April 16, 1945, the sounds are no longer distant. American guns are in the valley. German guards begin to melt away. Some abandon their posts. Others throw off uniforms and disappear into the countryside. By the afternoon, American tanks from the U.S. 69th Infantry Division roll up to the castle. The gates, which have held so many desperate hopes for so long, are opened from the outside. About 200 prisoners step into the courtyard, free for the first time in years. Among them, walking with the unique, measured rhythm of his artificial legs, is Wing Commander Douglas Bader. He has been a prisoner of war for 3 years and 9 months. An American lieutenant, seeing the way he moves, asks how long he has been in German hands and what happened to his legs. Bader's answer is simple. He lost them long before the war, and he has been flying since 1940. The lieutenant doesn't believe it until other British officers confirm the story. Within days, the former prisoners are moved to Allied processing centers. On April 22, 1945, Bader was flown back to England and landed at RAF Northolt. The double-amputee fighter pilot, who should never have seen combat, has come home from a world war in which he shot down 23 enemy aircraft, forged one of the most unusual acts of chivalry between enemies, the delivery of a prosthetic leg across a hostile front, and spent almost 4 years defying his captors behind barbed wire and stone walls. That June, when Britain stages a great victory fly-past over London, 300 aircraft roaring over the Thames and Buckingham Palace, the man chosen to lead the formation is Douglas Bader. Once again, he straps himself into a Spitfire. Once again, the throttle goes forward, the tail lifts, and the aircraft gathers speed. Once again, he takes his place at the head of a formation, but this time it is not to fight. It is to mark the end of the war that he refused to sit out.